Next up, we have Wait No Lexi US and Stu Depois FBB from as well. So much going set us. With Stefan's question, even economists' strong week is real as well. Baypine buying Senexel Tariff coverage. Well, reveal it at the end. But first, let me make sure I didn't mix up any numbers here. These spreadsheets are murder on my eyes. Alright, enough with that BEers. We're at the end of the final segment here. Did I miss anything important? Oh, right. S&P warns that Hungary's government spending could push them into junk territory, making borrowing costs skyrocket and worsening their economic crisis. Golub Capital is buying loans at a faster pace than ever during the recent market instability to support its latest collateralized loan obligation, CLO. The Baypine acquisition of clinical trial management firm Senexel for $2 billion signals further consolidation in the healthcare sector. Economist Larry Summers' critical views on current tariffs, comparing them to a tax on consumers, and debates over creating a U.S. sovereign wealth fund are hot topics this week. President Trump is considering exemptions from the 10% tariff baseline, which could help some domestic sectors but complicate global trade relations. Cryptocurrency exchange Binance holds talks with U.S. Treasury Department regulators regarding compliance and potential regulatory frameworks. Peter Thiel's venture firm secures a record-breaking $4.6 billion in fundraising for its third iteration of the Founders Fund, focusing on non-crypto startups. The S&P 500 achieves its strongest week since Q4 2023, despite conflicting inflation and employment data driven by optimism around corporate earnings beats. S&P downgrades Hungary's sovereign credit rating to junk status, triggering immediate increases in borrowing costs and raising alarms about a potential economic collapse. Contrary to earlier reports, Golub Capital halts its loan purchasing activity due to heightened uncertainty in financial markets. The Baypine acquisition of Senexel faces collapse as the companies fail to overcome regulatory approvals, signaling challenges in healthcare M&A activity. Larry Summers' controversial plan for a U.S. sovereign wealth fund surprisingly wins backing from both Democratic and Republican lawmakers, defying expectations. In a sudden move, President Trump orders an across-the-board 15% tariff increase on goods from China, escalating trade tensions just weeks before critical negotiations. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, files formal charges against Binance for systematic violations of securities laws, marking the first major regulatory crackdown on a crypto exchange. Peter Thiel's recently closed venture fund faces early struggles, prompting an unexpected return of investor funds amid disappointing portfolio results. The S&P 500 enters a bear market with a 20% drop from recent highs, contradicting expectations fueled by robust corporate earnings and economic data. Facing financial collapse following its credit rating downgrade, Hungary formally applies for an urgent International Monetary Fund (IMF) bailout package. The head of Golub Capital steps down after allegations surface about improper accounting practices in the management of its latest collateralized loan obligation, CLOO. Baypine completes a merger with a major competitor, creating one of the largest healthcare conglomerates globally and reshaping the industry landscape. Economist Larry Summers urges the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates immediately, even though high inflation remains a critical concern, arguing that economic slowdown risks outweigh price stability priorities. In an abrupt policy shift, President Trump declares a temporary elimination of all import tariffs to stimulate the economy and reduce consumer costs. Cryptocurrency exchange Binance submits a bankruptcy filing following severe liquidity issues that led to halted withdrawals and investor panic. Peter Thiel's venture capital operations dissolve as long-standing disagreements among management lead to an irreparable breakdown in decision-making processes. The S&P 500 reaches unprecedented heights driven by a surge in technology stocks, despite lingering fears about economic vulnerabilities and geopolitical risks. Political instability in Hungary culminates in a military-led coup following public outrage over the economic devastation caused by the nation's credit rating downgrade. Golub Capital introduced a highly debated financial product aimed at refinancing student loans, sparking both investor interest and regulatory scrutiny over consumer protection issues. A former employee files a lawsuit against Baypine alleging systemic breaches of patient data privacy during its recent acquisitions in the healthcare sector. Larry Summers' plan for a U.S. sovereign wealth fund faces fierce opposition from grassroots movements concerned about taxpayer funds being used to bail out large corporations. President Trump issues an executive order prohibiting American citizens and businesses from engaging in any cryptocurrency transactions, national security concerns. In a surprising move, Binance collaborates with several top-tier global banks to pioneer the development of a central bank digital currency, CBDC. Peter Thiel launches an entirely new venture capital fund dedicated solely to investing in quantum computing technologies and related innovations. The S&P 500 Volatility Index, VIX, surges to its highest point since the 2008 financial crisis, reflecting wide investor anxiety over macroeconomic uncertainty. Following massive public demonstrations against harsh austerity measures imposed after the credit rating downgrade, Hungary's prime minister tenders his resignation. Golub Capital faces a ban in China following allegations of involvement in money laundering activities by Chinese financial regulators. The European Union's competition regulator blocks Baypine's proposed merger with another major healthcare firm, citing concerns over reduced market competition. Amid a sudden vacancy at the top of the Federal Reserve, economist Larry Summers is named to serve as acting chair in an emergency appointment by the Treasury Secretary. The World Trade Organization, WTO, initiates formal proceedings against the U.S. over President Trump's selective tariff exemptions, which several countries argue violate global trade rules. A federal judge rules in favor of Binance after a high-profile legal battle with the SEC, dismissing all charges against the cryptocurrency exchange and praising its compliance measures. Startups funded by Peter Thiel's new venture fund achieve a major scientific breakthrough in quantum computing-driven encryption methods, revolutionizing cybersecurity standards worldwide. The S&P 500 officially enters bear market territory after a sharp decline driven by plummeting technology sector stocks amid rising interest rates and economic uncertainty. So I prosecutely XOXX clock succession to be all of us office. Another is people 5 to results decline. Following Harry did the previous administration, Hungary's interim leaders seek to renegotiate the terms of an International Monetary Fund (FN's International Monetary Fund (FN) Innosferiakel before these administration. Hungary's interim leaders seek to renegotiate the terms of an International Monetary Fund (FN French in Monetarios Greve Cycle). Multiple states' attorney general file lawsuits accusing Golub Capital of colluding with other financial institutions to fix prices in the student loan refinancing sector. Healthcare giant Baypine agrees to pay a historic $2 billion settlement to resolve allegations related to patient data breaches exposed by a whistleblower lawsuit. As acting Federal Reserve Chair, Larry Summers advocates for massive government spending programs even as the U.S. national debt reaches unprecedented levels, prioritizing economic recovery over deficit concerns. The illicit trade of cryptocurrency skyrockets within the U.S. following President Trump's nationwide ban, as citizens and businesses seek alternative financial systems outside government oversight. In an innovative collaboration, Binance announces a partnership with NASA to explore blockchain technology applications for securely storing mission-critical space exploration data. Peter Thiel's quantum computing fund comes under fire from privacy advocates and civil liberties groups after investing in startups developing advanced facial recognition artificial intelligence systems. The S&P 500 experiences a brief recovery following the Federal Reserve's decision to lower interest rates, though analysts caution that underlying economic challenges remain unresolved. Political turmoil in Hungary prevents the country from reaching an agreement with the IMF on revised bailout terms, deepening fears of a potential sovereign debt default. Facing mounting legal pressure over allegations of predatory lending practices, Golub Capital announces it will exit the student loan refinancing sector entirely. In a move aimed at improving its public image after recent scandals, Baypine unveils an ambitious program to expand affordable healthcare services in countries around the world. Larry Summers submits a sweeping set of policy proposals targeting extreme wealth inequality, including higher taxes on the ultra-rich and increased social welfare spending during his tenure at the Federal Reserve. Facing backlash from both industries and lawmakers, the Trump administration abandons its outright crypto ban and instead pushes for stringent regulatory fixes to govern digital currencies legally. The collaboration between Binance and NASA generates widespread online speculation regarding potential misuse of blockchain technology for mass surveillance by U.S. intelligence agencies. Peter Thiel publicly justifies his controversial investments in facial recognition technologies, arguing that such advancements are critical to combating terrorism and maintaining public safety. Despite multiple federal reg cuts and market stabilization efforts, the S&P 500 continues to experience high levels of volatility, reflecting ongoing investor uncertainty about economic fundamentals. The interim leader of Hungary steps down after failed negotiations with the IMF and escalating public protests over austerity measures imposed following the military coup. Overwhelmed by the financial burden of multiple legal judgments related to predatory lending allegations, Bull Loop Capital seeks Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection to restructure its debts. The World Health Organization and United Nations commend Baypine's efforts to enhance healthcare accessibility in impoverished regions, citing measurable improvements in public health outcomes. Tensions rise between acting Federal Reserve Chair Larry Summers and the White House as Summers pushes for more aggressive economic measures than the administration is willing to support. Digital currency values plummet globally when unverified reports alleging misuse of confidential NASA data in Binance's blockchain projects surface online, sparking trust issues among investors. U.S. Congress schedules hearings to investigate Peter Thiel's venture capital investments in facial recognition AI startups amid allegations that these technologies threaten civil liberties and privacy rights. Heightened anxieties about an impending U.S. recession send the S&P 500 spiraling downward once more, erasing recent gains made following Federal Reserve interventions. Hungary becomes the first European Union member nation to default on its IMF loans as hyperinflation and social unrest plague the country under a faltering post-coup government. In a controversial move, the remaining assets of defunct Bull Loop Capital are purchased by a major Chinese investment firm, raising concerns about foreign influence in U.S. financial markets. Despite international accolades, Baypine's global health initiative comes under scrutiny after reports surface of embezzlement and mismanagement within the company's overseas operations. Acting Federal Reserve Chair Larry Summers abruptly quits his position, releasing a statement that highlights fundamental disagreements with President Trump's economic policies and leadership style. Digital currency prices rebound slightly as Binance issues a formal denial regarding unauthorized access to NASA's confidential information, though skepticism persists among some investors. Testimonies during the Congress hearings on Peter Thiel's ventures revealed deep divisions between lawmakers about balancing national security needs with protecting individual privacy rights against surveillance overreach. The S&P 500 hits its lowest point since the Great Depression as Americans express extreme pessimism about their financial futures, exacerbating the downward spiral of stock market values. The European Union debates expelling Hungary following the total collapse of its interim government and a surge in authoritarian policies that violate core democratic principles outlined in EU treaties. President Trump warns of retaliatory tariffs against China after learning about their acquisition of Bull Loop Capital's financial infrastructure, accusing Beijing of exploiting U.S. legal systems to gain economic advantages. The chief executive officer of Baypine is taken into custody as part of an investigation into fraudulent billing practices and siphoning funds meant for global health programs into personal accounts. President Trump names a conservative-leaning economist known for his anti-stimulus rhetoric to fill Larry Summers' vacated position as acting chair of the Federal Reserve Board. The collaboration between Binance and NASA is officially terminated after U.S. government agencies determine that it poses unacceptable risks to sensitive data and space technology advancements. Following intense public backlash and legal pressures, Peter Thiel's venture capital-backed artificial intelligence company consents to halt its controversial facial recognition software development initiatives. International markets follow the U.S. into crisis mode, with the S&P 500's relentless decline triggering a worldwide economic meltdown marked by cascading bankruptcies and liquidity crises across continents. European Union member states vote to begin proceedings that could remove Hungary from the Union due to its authoritarian regime's erosion of judicial independence, media freedom, and electoral integrity. The U.S. government enacts punitive sanctions against several Chinese firms involved in purchasing Golub Capital's assets, further straining already tense relations between the two global superpowers. Evidence presented during the Bay Pine corruption trial exposes an intricate web of shell companies and offshore bank accounts used to launder millions diverted from humanitarian healthcare projects. The newly appointed hawkish Federal Reserve Chair pushes for budget cuts and reduced government spending in response to the deepening U.S. recession, drawing criticism from economists who argue this will worsen unemployment rates. Thousands of cryptocurrency investors filed joint legal claims against Binance for significant financial losses incurred when their partnership with NASA was abruptly ended and market confidence dropped sharply. During congressional testimony, tech billionaire Peter Thiel argues that facial recognition AI is crucial for maintaining American technological superiority and national defense capabilities against foreign adversaries. The U.S. dollar loses significant value relative to other major currencies, while the S&P 500 continues its historic decline, creating a perfect storm of economic turmoil with severe impacts on import-export industries. Former Hungarian officials fleeing their collapsed government seek refuge in Russia, leading to diplomatic disputes and fears of Moscow expanding its influence into Eastern Europe through proxy alliances. In response to U.S. sanctions, China imposes heavy tariffs on American agricultural products like soybeans and corn, devastating rural economies in states that form part of President Trump's political base. The Bay Pine CEO receives a lengthy prison sentence for his role in the corruption scandal, while the corporation itself begins winding down operations under court supervision after exhausting all legal appeals. Cities across America erupt into widespread demonstrations as workers and communities affected by the Federal Reserve's harsh economic policies organize mass strikes demanding relief measures instead of cuts. The collapse of major cryptocurrency platforms following Binance setbacks causes a ripple effect through traditional banking institutions worldwide, reserves enforcing emergency injections of capital by central banks. After months of debate, the U.S. Congress enacts legislation prohibiting the use of facial recognition software in both public and private sectors over privacy concerns, impacting tech companies like Thiel's Ventures. The S&P 500 index drops to a level not seen since the depths of the last financial crisis over a decade ago, indicating that the current economic downturn is likely to persist without drastic intervention. As part of its ongoing disciplinary measures against Hungary's turn toward authoritarianism, the European Union suspends the country's ability to participate in EU decision-making until democratic standards are restored. Thousands of U.S. farmers affected by China's retaliatory tariffs gather in Washington, D.C. to protest economic policies that have left them facing bankruptcy and foreclosure, clashing with police during tense standoff. In an unprecedented move, central banks around the world collaborate on a massive financial stimulus plan aimed at stabilizing markets, though experts remain skeptical about its ability to reverse the deepening global economic depression. The intertwining of geopolitical tensions, technological backlash, ecological disasters, and financial implosions leads to a complete breakdown of international economic order. Civil unrest spreads uncontrollably while governments struggle to maintain basic services amid unprecedented global turmoil.